Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on what I promise is going to be a really timely and important discussion, Modern TBM, why yesterday's TBM fails today's business. My name is Gavin Drake. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Nicus, a software company that really is dedicated to helping organizations manage and optimize the value of their technology investments. We're proud to be driving innovation in TBM alongside our partners at ServiceNow and also actively engaged supporting the TBM Council. I'll be your host today and guide for this session. I'm joined by two outstanding experts, Craig Hollenbeck, our SVP of TBM Strategy here at Nicus, and Mark Bodman, who is the Senior Product Manager at ServiceNow for their Common Services Data Model, or CSDM, and their CMDB. Before we get started, let me just give you a very quick legal-facing harbor statement, which covers any forward-looking statements that we're going to have from presenters today. You can obviously look back at that at your leisure in the recording. Yes, we are recording the session, so we'll send out links to the recording once we're done. So let me start by quickly setting the stage for this webinar, and indeed for Modern TBM. I'm assuming most of you attending know what Technology Business Management, or TBM, is, but just in case, TBM is the practice of managing the value of technology across an organization. It was created to help leaders understand costs, make smarter decisions, and align tech investments to business goals. And while TBM was a breakthrough a decade or more ago, many organizations are now struggling with legacy TBM tools and practices that aren't keeping pace with today's business realities. That's why we're here to introduce what we call Modern TBM and explain how it's being used to unlock enterprise-wide value, increase value within organizations, and make faster and smarter decisions. So here's how we're going to spend our time today. I'll start with a quick look at why TBM still matters, what's changing in the environment around us. Then we're going to dig in and have a look at some of the market forces that are reshaping TBM. From there, I'll take a hard look at what's broken, what we believe is broken, and what we're hearing is broken in legacy TBM and why it's not working for organizations. And then we'll introduce Modern TBM and go through our 4 pillars of Modern TBM, the 7 enablers. And after that, we'll have a look at why we believe ServiceNow is such a strong fit platform for Modern TBM, especially when paired with Nicus. We'll wrap up with some Q&A at the end. So as you go through, if you have questions, please put those into the Q&A chat that you should see at the bottom of your panel screen there. We also have a broad chat, so if you've got technical issues, you can put that to the team behind the scenes, but we'll be looking in this Q&A panel for your questions when we get there. So let me just introduce our speakers in a little bit more detail. Craig Hollenbeck brings decades of experience shaping technology business management programs. He co-founded a company called Proven FM, which is now part of Nicus, and they had a reputation for delivering real-time impact to Fortune 1000 firms, public sector, US government. Prior to this, Craig led IT financial management for a Fortune 100 company where he was managing $1 billion plus in IT budget, and consistently over 7 years was driving a 3 to 5% annual efficiencies, keeping overall IT spend flat. So he really understands this deeply, not just from his real operator experience, but from the number of organizations that he works with on a daily basis here. And then we're really excited to have Mark Bodman with us from ServiceNow. He's widely regarded as the founding father of the ServiceNow Common Services Data Model, affectionately known in the community apparently as the patron saint of CSDM. And I think for good reason. He chairs the Open Group's IT for IT forum, and he brings over a decade of experience applying that IT for IT standards in more than 100 different customer engagements. You'll see he's just got deep expertise across the board, lots of experience in the TBM realm, but deep expertise in designing data foundations that work across IT and business systems. I think combined with his ability to break down complex architecture into practical insights, it just makes him the perfect person to speak to Modern TBM and certainly some of the more data-driven aspects of that. So let's get started. We're going to keep this reasonably casual. We've got some slides that we'll put up as we're talking, but really this is going to be a conversation with Craig and Mark as we go through and unpack this topic further. So Now, with the stage set and our speakers introduced, let's just talk a little bit about some of the trends in the market that we think are driving that need for change and actually have been driving that need for change for some time. So thanks, Mark, Craig. Mark, do you want to kick us off and just talk about some of the trends that you're seeing in the market today?
Sure, sure. When it comes to the costing and sort of where we're actually expanding our platform into more of the product side of what customers are selling to their customers, and the cost element of the equation isn't enough. You want to really get to profit and loss, right? You want to know how much are you really making on this product versus that product. We also want to see and simplify the data model in a way that we can figure some of that out. Because if you're looking at like a CMDB, which is one of the product areas that I manage, and CSDM makes sense of the CMDB and allows you to have context with the data that allows you to say, well, this is where it's consumed internally. This is consumed by external customers. And the last thing I would say is that there's a need to better understand how do I want to invest and optimize the technology spend that I have. It's not just good enough to say how much we're spending now, but how much should we invest or shouldn't we invest in things going forward, given the market trends or maybe the cost drivers internally, or even the growth drivers. It's not only about cost, but where are you putting the money in where you need to grow? So those are the trends that I've seen. And you guys being on the platform makes it easier to establish the use of the data that me and my team basically helps to establish here on the platform itself. So.
Yeah, and Mark, obviously ServiceNow are making a huge bet themselves in AI and have made a huge bet there. What impact is AI having on those things you were talking about?
Well, it's where people are spending all their money now. So if you want to make that direct equation, right, even we have about 25% and more of most of our engineering resources kind of focused on AI capabilities. Some of them are new functionality. Some are to shore up the security and open up partnerships with other folks. And you guys also, were part of the Knowledge Conference, and you were showcasing some of your AI capabilities on our platform. That was pretty cool. And so there's just a big, huge race. It's a bit of a gold rush into this space. There's a lot of governance concerns, not just on spend, but am I putting something in my AI that's not that shouldn't be trusted? Like, where is that data coming from? Well, who's the source of that data? Do I trust the outcomes that are coming from this AI? So I get a lot of interest in the governance side of the house, not just the spend, and seeing the gold rush going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, how about yourself? What are you seeing right now in the market? I know, things are changing very quickly. I came across this data point recently, just around speed of change here, which I think was really interesting, and it is driving a lot of challenges for organizations.
Yeah, I love what Mark went through. I think that even beyond just the tech pressures, I'd say that expectations are changing. CIOs and CFOs now have to prove value, not just track costs. There's a big check written every year for technology, and it's bigger every single year. And they need to know where those monies are being spent and that they're being focused on the right enterprise strategies, the right products in the marketplace. It's essential. They need solutions that are going to support them through continuous planning, scenario monitoring, smart automation. But even beyond that, when we're linking the finance organization between the business organization and then IT as well, ultimately, the business stakeholders, they're demanding things to be faster. They want their insights to be more flexible and dynamic, and they want to make decisions real time. So the pressure is real in this space, and we need to do it smarter and better and faster.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. One trend that I think is really recent, like in the past couple of weeks or so, is just a very public stated aim by FinOps to try and start to solve challenges beyond cloud spend. Obviously, FinOps has been very much a bottoms-up approach, daily, hourly. How do I optimize my cloud spend, my storage, CPUs, cores, etc.? How do I scale that up and down and make sure I don't overspend on cloud? But this was from Forrester write-up from the FinOps X conference just earlier this month. FinOps teams have a new mandate managing and optimizing the total cost of IT, right? And so strikes me that sounds a lot like TBM. Mark, what are your thoughts on FinOps now having an appetite beyond cloud spend?
Yeah, I have to say I'm not too surprised, because you sort of conquer an area, then you kind of grow, you kind of expand from there. So these things are starting to overlap more and more. Essentially, that's what CSDM represents in my topic of expertise. It represents a model that it's expanded to many different areas of the organization, and it all coincides with one another. But FinOps, kind of the interesting thing, because I'm not an expert in FinOps by any means, but when I learned about it, I was like, well, that's just optimizing cost in a certain area of the portfolio. There's other portfolios to consider. There's other angles to consider, and it's not really addressed yet, which is so that yeah, it just makes sense. They got to expand to optimize other areas.
Craig, how about your thoughts? I know this is something you've spoken on at conferences, and that intersection between TBM and FinOps.
Right. Like Mark said, yeah, it continues to grow, and I think their scope is expanding along with the value that we're looking for. I think for me, when I see it, it's just another further validation that the problem is here. ITFM and TBM have been trying to solve it for a period of time, and it really isn't going away. If you look at Gartner's piece here, they recognize and focus on it as well. I think ultimately, what is needed for organizations is a modern approach to really tackle our modern problems. And that's really what they're trying to help with here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an interesting point you made there, Craig, that the problem isn't going away, right? The suggestion is people still want to solve this, new organizations want to solve it. And the reason is not just solving it for the sake of it. It's a real challenge for organizations with the amount of dollars they're investing in technology, to how they align that with business, how they accelerate transformation. And it still hasn't been done very well across the board, right? There are pockets where organizations have done it successfully, but I think that moves us probably to our next topic in conversation, which is, why is legacy TBM falling short, right? We talk, obviously, as Nicus, to a lot of organizations that have been in this market with other tools for a number of years, some of them more than a decade, and still, despite that investment, feeling that they're not where they need to be. So could you kick us off with that, Mark, and just kind of give your thoughts on where you think TBM, that legacy TBM, falls short?
Yeah, there's three main topics that I'll address. The first one is one that's I've been trying to work on for some years now, is to be much more open and collaborative as a industry kind of thing, and that's been difficult for other folks to kind of get involved and say what they think, right, and be involved outside of a smaller scoped number of participants. So that's one. The second area is that TBM is really a cost-driven model. It's like, I've already spent the money. Where did we spend it? It's sort of looking in the rearview mirror to a large degree, and now what you do. So it has utility, but then where do you go next? And I think the third part is that because of that backwards thinking, right, where you're thinking where you spent the money, the top-down aspects aren't there, and they're missing sort of the three key areas. There's the cost part, which you need to know, but then how are you optimizing that? And do you have the right context to do that? And then there's which is the FinOps story, or app rationalization story, that I've done a lot, throughout my career. And the last is then, how do you optimize spend going forward? What's your strategy? Where are you going to get in the money? Are you going to shuffle resources from that team to that team and that team? So to me, that's kind of the three areas which they don't really address. And I think a more modern approach is required.
Craig, I know you engage with a number of customers that have gone through this journey. Tell us a little bit about what you see in terms of why legacy TBM is falling short.
Sure. The promise of TBM is great, right? Transparency, alignment, cost control. But in practice, I think what we've often seen in the marketplace for those who have been leveraging it, it often falls short in a few key areas. I think the first is around uh, really IT being a black box and driving the type of transparency you need, and then combining it with kind of directional results. You see a lot of organizations that once they stand it up, they ultimately get a view into costs that they've never seen before. I call it the high five moment. Everybody's excited about it, and they should be. They're taking the first steps down this journey. But I think the rubber really meets the road when they're looking back and seeing that they're not really driving any decisions in the enterprise. Nothing's really being done differently as a result of really their investment of time and effort and money into the capability. I think when you look under the covers for that as well, what we see quite a bit is organizations have put in a non-responsive or rigid cost model that ultimately disconnects your decisions from results. So you shut off an application, you actually want to see those dollars go out the door, and you don't necessarily see that. You need to make sure that that model that you have in place aligns to your technology delivery model that you have today, and that's changing faster and faster. But then ultimately, we always need to translate back to the language of the business, and we need to put it into their world, the value they're looking for, the things they're trying to drive. And too often you see really us trying to deliver out of a legacy TBM approach, information and insights out from a technology lens. We really need to put it in the world and language of the business. If they don't understand what they're looking at, they're not able to leverage it for the right decisions.
That's great. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Mark. So let's move on from looking backwards and look forwards and talk about modern TBM. And modern TBM is just fundamentally a different way of thinking. It's not about a set of tools or a platform. It's an operating model designed to meet real world needs of today's organizations. And it builds on the original goals of TBM, no doubt, but I think modernizes how these goals are delivered with speed, flexibility, agility, and most importantly, measurable impact across the entire enterprise. So I'm going to jump in and put a little bit more meat on the bones here, and we're going to have a look at what we call 4 pillars of modern TBM and the 7 enablers, and then I'm going to bring Mark and Craig to deep dive a little bit more on a couple of those. So let's start with what I would consider to be the most important one, and one that Craig was really just hitting there in terms of the challenge. People talk about value alignment and delivery, but rarely does it happen. And I don't think it rarely happens because there's a lack of willpower. I think all too often, software forces organizations to organize their data in such a way that it just can't align, right? If you don't start with value at the start of the design of the system and start with the end in mind, and particularly if you just end up with a cookie cutter cost model, it becomes really difficult to align that with your strategic objectives, right? And modern TBM is more than just justifying spend or tracking value. It has to be a way of driving forward in terms of meaningful results. And I think, Mark hit that as well, right? It can't just be rear view mirror. We need to use that to inform the future, but we need to be able to take the significant dollars, in some cases, billions of dollars that are being spent on technology and make sure that's aligned with strategic objectives to drive forward. I think the second thing is we all recognize that organizations want to get to value quickly. And it is terrible when you look at organizations that have been on this journey for years and you don't feel like they've still got to the unlocking of the value that they should have done as an organization. And yes, part of that is how quickly can you put a solution in and stand it up. But I think there's another part of that, which is the decision-making part, right? How can I get people quicker towards decision-making? And I was going to bring up, I don't have that slide here, but I was just looking at some data points around senior business leaders and their decision-making process and understanding that I think 77% of business leaders said that they would rather a robot take the decision for them because of the complexity. But I think in this particular case, it's how can I get to the insights quicker? And that's a problem, right? If it takes me weeks or months to be able to get the answers I need at the speed that business is moving today, it's just too slow. The third pillar here is that enterprise-wide technology scope. And yes, you're going to say, well, isn't TBM technology business management? Yes, it is. But I would say that the vast majority of organizations engaged in TBM right now are still really only applying it to IT. I think there are very few cases where it's expanded beyond IT into embedded technology, into situations where technology is the product. And there are huge technology costs involved, but they're not really being put through a solution like this. And then, of course, we have the obligatory AI-powered insights and automation. But I do believe that AI can play a transformational role here in making ITFM and TBM more scalable, accessible, and action-oriented. One of the challenges you've had up until this point is you either need an MBA in finance or you need to be a technology expert or both to be able to join the dots and get to the right insights to make decisions. I really do think AI has the ability here to democratize what you're doing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So let's just have a look at the 7 enablers, and we are not going to go through all of these in detail, but this is where the rubber hits the road and we start to get more practical about what it takes to have a modern TBM platform that delivers on those 4 pillars. The first one is a flexible, decision-driven cost model. So linking technology spend directly with strategic value streams and outcomes. And I'm going to have Craig dig in a little bit deeper on this in just a moment. Second is that AI-powered actionable insights. And I think it is in modern TBM right now where most people are is it's very reactive. I'm going into a chatbot. I'm asking a question. I'm looking for an answer. Well, guess what? If I don't have an MBA in finance, do I even know what question to ask? Do I even know what I'm looking for? So I think where modern TBM needs to move to quickly is more proactive insights where I'm getting guided on my decision-making, not expecting that the person going in there has all of the answers. So that I think is going to be a key trend that we're going to see. Thirdly, we talked about speed to results and this idea of scalable maturity, crawl, walk, run, fly, right? How do I provide a clear and manageable progression path that aligns with stakeholder needs? I think too often with legacy TBM, people have thought they're one and done. To your point, Craig, they have the high five moment. They see the cost data. But this is a maturity path that takes a long time. And at Nicus, I know we're trying to work out, and we have some solutions like our FMDB products that are designed to get people started quicker without a multi-month or multi-year investment so they can get going. They can see some initial results, prove those results. Much like Mark said with FinOps, I can prove it in one area and then I can expand it out to another. So I do think scalable maturity is a key component of modern TBM to drive wider adoption. Mark is going to, as you can imagine, dig in a little bit more on this idea of this unified and integrated CSDM data and taxonomy and structure and the CMDB. But you need to have a single reliable source of truth linking operational financial data in real time. And so that we'll talk about a little bit more. And then Craig is going to talk a little bit in a moment on the third one of these, number 5 in this list, which is the integrated cross-functional. Actually, he's not going to talk about that, I lie. I'm going to talk about integrated cross-function. Craig is going to talk about optimization. I can see the look on your face there, Craig. You were thinking, I can talk to anything. So this integrated cross-functional collaboration, I think often you end up with a political battle internally with who has the data. And I think that's historically been a challenge, not just for CIOs and for CFOs when they're looking at different views of the data, but also business stakeholders that maybe have no view of the data to look at at all. So modern TBM is about trying to break down silos, not just through shared dashboards or communication, but through integrated workflows, unified data, role relevant insights by connecting IT, finance, procurement, functional stakeholders, product teams. So they're all looking at the same version of that information. And I think that takes the politics out. It replaces them with facts. It replaces anecdotes with facts and streamlines that governance and decision-making process. And that's one of the things we love about the ServiceNow platform, as that platform extends to be that operating system of business, is having a unified approach to that is really difficult when you've got siloed systems. Craig will in fact talk to continuous optimization and automation. How do we support ongoing improvements and streamline technology, financial management? Because the reality is business and the world around us is not slowing down. It is just accelerating, and we can't stand still with that. And then the seventh of our enablers is having a future-ready TBM framework. We've got to be able to adapt seamlessly to evolving technologies, financial models, business priorities, right? If we align what we're doing with strategic priorities, those strategic priorities will be different in 3 years' time, right? They're strategic because they are not necessarily short-term, but you can't say this is what we're going to do till the end of time. So I think technology investment is no longer episodic, right? It's accelerating as digital products, AI-driven automation take stage. And so we've got to make sure that modern TBM is able to keep up with that and doesn't get left behind. So with that in mind, I'm going to start by handing across to you, Craig, just to talk a little bit about this idea of a flexible decision-driven cost model and how that's different to how people have been doing it in the past.
Sure. Yeah, we've certainly seen some trends in the marketplace. I think traditional models oftentimes spread costs a little more too broadly. They don't necessarily map it to how the business sees the value. We talked a little about that earlier. Modern TBM flips that. We think about the common services data model that Mark is a master of, thinking about the delivery model of technology for the enterprise. We can take that and align that all throughout the organization, how it's being consumed, even down to strategic value streams, so that the business understands, here are the strategies we're trying to enable, and how IT is actively managing to support and enable those. We also want to make sure that if we make a decision, the dollars actually go away if we're trying to turn something off. So in this space, we're looking for things to be defensive, defendable, responsive, and really align back to the business. I think what that sets us up that we have to get done and get done well is we have to make sure that the results we're showing to our stakeholders are accurate. We're not putting false levers on the page, things that they think that number is X, but it's actually Y, because that can really impact how we prioritize where we're going to shift our focus and what decisions we're going to make. Additionally, we need things to be responsive. So we need them to connect directly to our decisions, which means don't peanut butter spread our costs. You don't take the cost of a CIO and align them across an application. The fact that you bought another user license doesn't mean you need more CIO. So we want the models to respond to our actual daily decisions that we have, so that we know what we're looking at today is accurate, and that we know what we're going to actually get tomorrow based upon the decisions we made today. But then always back to the business, always back to the language of what the business leadership uses as they continue to manage the enterprise. We want that to be relevant. All of our insights, all of our results, everything we communicate out, relevant to the way in which they manage their business, which oftentimes is a little bit different than how we actually manage IT.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Mark, obviously, I want you to talk a little bit to this idea of having a common approach to data structure and that common data framework, as well as obviously unified data in the CMDB as well. I know you've got a couple of slides to talk to that, so let me put those up for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll start with, this is a view of CSDM version 5. We've been iterating on CSDM now for, 8 years now. It took us like 2 years of just haggling just to get CSDM published #1, and it's because we had to combine a data model that spans ideation and strategy now, all the way to, service delivery and operations, and all the way to sales and consumption models that you're tracking who's using what. And so I think the magic of CSDM was to bring the different camps together and form a single approach that works. Operationally, we do this every day now. We naturally use this data model that stitches together this information that from left to right, right to left, it all connects. And in my career, I've always had to do this either outside through reporting means, or I had to glue very many products together to try to make this work. it was never achievable. And on the platform, we have all the products that natively either use this data and then also populate it to make sure that it's all maintained and connected, from left to right, right to left, and in the middle. So that's kind of the magic of CSDM, and it's been quite interesting because the followers, the interests are huge. And this is really another piece of work that I've been doing. I don't know if you want to cover the 4 portfolios yet, but we'll maybe stem that for the next topic here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Craig, you want to talk a little bit about this idea that TBM isn't any longer just a once-a-year budgeting exercise? How do we get to continuous improvement in practice?
Yeah, continuous optimization, continuous improvement. Depends on what decade you're in, but there's always a need to continue to grow and enhance in the right direction. And today it's even more important because we are moving faster and faster. Like you said, this basically means TBM is not a once a year budgeting exercise anymore. With modern TBM, we want to be able to automate. We want to create feedback loops. We want to do smart planning. We want to have workflows that manage and audit and govern our processes. We need to leverage AI. As you mentioned earlier, Gavin, what I want to see is not where you have to actually understand what questions to put in the AI. I want it to be able to come to you and say, here are the 3 things you should look at today. There's a lot of opportunity for us to consider. And it's going to help us drive a lot of the things that we see out there in the space today, reallocating spend across the portfolios, improving efficiencies inside the enterprise, and reacting to the challenges and decisions we have in front of us in real time. You don't make decisions annually, you make them daily. So we need to be able to position ourselves to make decisions daily as well. And it needs to be wrapped around what is the modern era technology delivery. So this is actually how you make TBM relevant and strategic for your organization for a long time.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And thank you, Mark, as well. So, I'm sure it will seem self-serving to the audience, but the reality is when you look at that, it's hard to think of another platform today that is better placed to be able to deliver modern TBM to the marketplace. So I'd love to hear from you, Mark, as a ServiceNow expert as well. Just tell us a little bit about why you think that ServiceNow is the right platform for modern TBM. I know you've got a slide that kind of digs in a little bit more on that.
Yeah. And as you bring that up, the main thing for me is that most IT folks have a technical acumen in that they're good in a certain technology area, and the managers kind of came up through the ranks, but they don't necessarily manage that technology spend. They don't manage and understand the costs or who their consumers are very well. They're just kind of part of a bigger team, and then they go off and they work on something else, as the priorities change. And so the reason I came to ServiceNow is because we have this opportunity to coexist and be on the same boat and work with each other much more closely. So we understand the handoffs between teams, and we understand what I would call the traceability between the decisions to invest in something to the outcomes that it realized, and also spot things like cost overruns or, I'll just give you an example. Where I worked, we had, when we started putting the model together, we found 1,000 data servers in the data center that weren't being used simply because they were decommissioned in this list, but never decommissioned on this list. So there's an obvious ways to spend just because you don't connect the dots in the data. And these are it's the high five moment that you said, Craig, which kind of came to light, because when you put this data together for the first time, it's like, there's a problem, we solved it. But then where do you go? It's like, this has got to be an everyday occurrence, right? This has got to be a thing that you're looking for every single day. And where we're looking at on the platform is creating these second brains, I call them, or Jiminy Cricket, which is on your shoulder, informing you what you should or shouldn't do. I wouldn't do that. You're going to, or just saying, hey, there's something going on here that looks like an anomaly. Tell somebody that could do something about it, because otherwise you just don't know. And cost and spend and, plans to invest or not invest should be part of that equation.
I'm going to use that Jiminy Cricket one, Mark. I think that's fun. You'd be surprised at how many times you go in and the server one just pops up so often where they actually don't connect the dots on it.
Well, I lived it, and here's what's really sad: we were building a whole new data center. We didn't need to do that, so we were almost we had a plan over here to solve the problem, which wasn't even a problem at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, and I think, Mark, obviously one thing that is really interesting about ServiceNow is it is connecting data, workflow, and AI, right? All three of those things that are working together. And that implies, because it connects workflow, it's about action as opposed to just data and insights. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that vision from ServiceNow and how you see that connecting to modern TBM?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in both areas, right? From an operational point of view, to break fix, but all the way through, investment in planning, and everybody needs money to do their jobs, right? And so the way that I look at it, at least from a ServiceNow perspective, is these jobs are being done on our platform using the same data, creating the same data that everybody else is depending on. Now, when you layer cost into this in investment budgets, I'll say budgets because that's what you're really dealing with from a top-down perspective. Is you got to marry the two. I'm a product manager at the end of the day, and when I became a product manager in 2009 for the first time, you got to justify investments. You got to ask somebody for more money if you need it, and you got to justify that. And then they're going to ask, well, what did you spend it on? And then you got to justify that. So I look at the job in IT as kind of coming to this products orientation, this product centric mindset to be accountable for what you're asking for, and having some level of transparency in that too. So there's the CSDM model and CMDB and ServiceNow platform gives you a lot of transparency. What we don't have in our product set is the ability to understand the costing aspects of all that right now. So you kind of are stitching the cost in the financial picture together on top of our model.
Yeah, and I assume you see the benefits of kind of taking away that as a point solution, right? The fact that, and maybe that's just a broader trend we expect to continue to see in the market, is less point solution and more platform solutions.
Yeah, there's a customer that I've worked with. They have a platform strategy. They're trying to eliminate all one-off systems and come down to just 6 platforms to run the company. And it's a Fortune 50 company. So I don't know if these are strategies that I'm seeing within the companies that I work with as a way to eliminate the disparity between all the different systems. And just another interesting data point. I did a study when I was with HP Software. It costs around $400,000 in order to establish and maintain a integration between 2 disparate systems throughout its lifetime.
Wow.
And you do the math on the number of integrations that a company might have to have with disparate systems, and that the cost of that alone is just is astronomical.
Yeah, that's incredible. So let's move to our Q&A session. So if you've got questions from what you've heard so far, we would love to hear them. You can just post those directly into the Q&A panel. First question that I've got here that I think is probably a good question for you, Craig. What is the typical starting point for someone that is thinking about moving from a legacy TBM platform and model to moving to a modern TBM approach?
Yeah, good question. I honestly think, and it sounds very much like being a consultant, but the only mistake is not getting started. So getting moving is the most important thing. But once you've started setting it in motion, I'm a big believer of understanding what does leadership want out of this particular capability. There's really only a few different, maybe 50 different things that somebody wants in an organization, but it's essential to understand what that value proposition is and those value drivers are for leadership, because you're going to want to be able to go back and report out and show things in that light. So understanding that front and center is absolutely key. And then being able to put in place a model like we talked about, responsive, credible, defensible, that is going to let you start to push things out and be able to deliver insights rapidly. That it's key. And you don't need to boil the ocean. I'm not a boil the ocean kind of guy. Let's figure out what the right pace of change is for an organization. and then go at that pace. And you can chunk off piece by piece on where you want to focus. Typically, what some things are on the hot seat that day. You can do the bite-sized chunks to make sure you deliver the right insights and value. But if you link into the stuff that Mark's talking about, which is dynamically monitoring and evolving as the delivery model does as well, you're set for success because you're able to see as your delivery model changes, new technology comes on, things get retired. So do your results and your insights, which is exactly what we want to be able to arm our leaders with as they make decisions.
Yeah, thank you. Question here for you, Mark. What is the implication when you don't have that common services data model in terms of disparate systems and how this comes together or doesn't come together?
Yeah, it goes back to my previous statement around the cost of integrations and all of this information, because it's on different systems, and I'll call it a semantic disparity. There's the same name might be used in different systems, but means something very different. So even after you integrate things, you may still have improperly understood those data sources, and the fact that you called something a product there, it's a service there, it's an application there, it's the same thing, but you don't make that correlation when you're making decisions, and now you're starting to go talk past each other, if that makes sense. So being on the platform and having the same data model, it ensures that doesn't happen, and we establish this common language that makes sure that when we're talking about an apple, it's an apple. It's not an orange colored red, or something crazy. So you have to have these ground rules in place for this to work. And that's been the challenge, but also the opportunity for ServiceNow to kind of sort that out. That's where CSDM kind of fits.
Yeah, a question here that I'd say is a little bit more strategic. Historically, often ITFM, IT financial management, TBM, has ended up staying within an IT finance group. But what would be or should be the benefits of modern TBM at a C-suite level, right? If someone is saying, "Hey, this is why we need this," how does that help the C-suite, the executives?
Yeah, from an executive point of view, I see it as a level of transparency in that you could double click and get some details on what you think or might have an indicator that says what's going on. So because we have the full data model, you could double click and then answer specific questions and defend your position, or ask if that's really what you're trying to do. The other thing is really profit and loss. To me, what's always frustrated me is that you might be in the middle of a very complex scenario. I stuff servers in a rack, and if I don't know the benefit of that, right, I don't know if what I'm doing is providing value to the company. I'll give you one example. I worked on trying to get rid of a mainframe in my career for 2 years, and at the end of the day, it wasn't a strategic priority, and it just pissed me off that I wasted 2 years of my life working on something that wasn't getting any investment. It was very bottom up. It wasn't top down. It wasn't our strategic priority. And I literally don't want to see other folks go through that waste of effort, ever again. Had I had CSDM or even ServiceNow, this may not have happened, right? I wouldn't have worked on something that didn't really have the meeting. Now, because of that work I did, we had greater transparency. I put the bones in place to provide the transparency to my leaders, and now they were able to steer better. But it was a 2-year effort to just do that for just the mainframe. That's all. A very, very, very narrow scope.
Gavin, if I can just dovetail on what Mark said. Some of our clients, like take an example in the insurance industry, they go out and start to pull in what I like to do, which is business costs. And now you can do a comparison trade-off. Look, IT's been automating business processes since IT's been around. And that really means ultimately that the business gets the benefits because we're automating, we're optimizing for them, and the costs go down to do something. But in IT, our costs continue to go up, which has its own challenge. But ultimately, when you're thinking about take a boring one like insurance, insurance claims, we all understand what an insurance claim is. Well, there's a cost of a claim. And if you're able to invest in the business and IT so that you can drive down the costs in the business by $5 a claim, but IT only goes up $2 a claim, well, now you just saved a net $3 per claim, which is a huge game changer. in a world of insurance for a large enterprise. These trade-offs are pretty significant. So starting to bring in the business costs on top of all of the stuff that we already have in the CSDM is hugely powerful. But one of my clients that I'm working with also is going out to the enterprise business processes. So there's a process across the enterprise that ultimately has legal, HR, IT, finance, right? It's got a whole host of things that make up that process. And being able to be accurate, responsive, defendable in from an IT perspective in that is one step, but everybody else starts to come along for the ride as well. And now you're making enterprise-wide decisions, not just on the technology portfolio enabling the business itself.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of goes into the 4-pillar slide there. We skipped over that one a little bit, but I'm seeing more of our customers going into using ServiceNow to manage their product that they create and serve their end customers. So that's one portfolio. What do you provide externally exactly, and how is that technology and how is that cost? And because that's where your profit is, right? That's where the income comes from. And
Right.
then there's the other 3 portfolios that support that in some way, both down at a very technology level, at a manufacturing level. I have a lot of customers that make beer or candy bars or ships and airplanes, and there's just so many manufacturing investments now that are automated more and more, and there's a cost of that, and then there's the cost of, like you're kind of mentioning it, Craig. It's all of these common employee jobs of payroll and finance and legal. All of those folks you need to do that to stay in business. All those jobs need to be optimized and as well. So there's kind of we kind of defined 4 key portfolios where people are making investments in technology in all these areas. All of it has to be accounted for, and it has to be relative to the end customer at the end of the day. Or if you're in the public service, service for citizens or defense of a country. So all of that matters.
Yeah, we
That's why
should
it's such
we
a
should
big
do a follow-up, Mark, at some point and dive a little bit deeper on the digital product portfolios, right? Because I think that is a really intriguing topic that aligns very well with modern TBM.
very much so.
Yeah, just flipping over to that slide. These are the 4 that we talk about, and at the end of the day, on the upper right is what you sell your customers. And this is based on work that I've been doing for the last, since 2018, is to kind of formulate those 4 portfolios from a top-down investment perspective, and then of course bottoms up in costing, management perspective.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, just conscious of the time, I know we've got some questions we haven't got to, so I do want to let you know that we will follow up with you directly on those questions to make sure everyone gets their questions answered. I know this is an interesting topic, and obviously many different tangents that we could go down in that conversation. So just as we wrap up, obviously we want to keep the conversation going. I want to say a huge thank you to Craig and Mark for your insights, invaluable. Hopefully been enjoyable for both of you to talk through topics that I know that you're passionate about. And thank you, obviously, to our attendees for your interest in modern TBM. So I want to leave you with some takeaways. Obviously, we have a lot of expertise within the Nicus team. We'd love to have a conversation with you, whether it's just to chat about your TBM challenges and give you our thoughts on those, whether it's to do something more formalized like a value assessment, which can bring real value to your organization to understand the impact that this could have strategically, or whether it's to see software. We'll be sending out a copy of the webinar recording and slides. And then I'm also going to highlight a couple of resources for you. So if you're an Apptio customer, or even if you're not, we've got one that's a little bit fun, which is our Ultimate Apptio Breakup Survival Guide. So no matter who you are, I encourage you to have a read there and go and check out the Spotify and Apple Music breakup playlists that accompany that guide. And then one that's a little bit more serious is our 7 steps to migrating off Apptio. But although it is specific to Apptio, actually the principles involved would apply to any legacy TBM platform that you're looking to move on from, and what it looks like. Because I think that can seem very scary, but to Craig's point earlier, you shouldn't let perfection stop you moving forward. I think there's nothing worse than staying where you are, because it seems like it's a difficult move to go from where you are to where you know you need to be. And obviously there are some first steps, and those don't need to be huge first steps. So those are available to you. There's also a link in here to a new CSDM5 white paper. So we'll include that in our follow-up email too. And then we've also got a Modern TBM white paper coming in the next few weeks as well that dives a little bit deeper. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate both of you joining us. Really appreciate the audience being with us, and wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.